I just wanted to start by welcoming you all here today. So my name's Debbie Hustings. I'm the NHS England London Carers Lead. But as I was explaining to those who joined the webinar earlier, I've worked in partnership with Crossroads Care Surrey certainly for the last 5 years in terms of this work portfolio. Thank you, Terry. I'll get you to click. And now that we've given everyone a warm welcome, we'll go on to the next slide. So I just wanted to start off with this definition of who is a carer. It's really important to acknowledge that any of us can be a carer. In fact, 60% of us are going to be carers in our lifetime. And it is an unpaid role. It's a role that we do to look after our loved ones, our family, our friends, our neighbours. It can start suddenly overnight with a catastrophic health event, like your husband or your wife has a stroke and suddenly you find, like Andrew Marr's wife that you're caring, or it can happen insidiously, as has often happened in my case where I've been caring for elderly parents. And it can also happen at any age. We have lots of young carers, and in fact, the latest figures say we have about 2 in every secondary school classroom. So lots to consider there, but many of us don't recognise ourselves as carers. Terry, could I get you to click? And I think very few of us would want to be a carer if we knew what it was going to entail. Certainly, as caring can escalate, caring can be a role that will be 365 days a year, 24 hours a day sometimes. And of course, being unpaid and also no pension, no bank holidays. Whenever I see all of those thank yous to our paid carers who are working bank holidays, I often think, what about all the unpaid carers who are working this bank holidays? So that's who we're talking about in this webinar. Thank you, Terry. And thinking about who are carers, I'm not sure who to accredit for this, but there are 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been carers, those who are currently carers, those who will be carers, and those who will need a carer. Now, I have definitely been the first 3, and I'll probably at some point be the 4th. And actually investing in care, because at some point everyone will need it, give it, or be in receipt of it, is really important. But how long do you think it takes on average before a person is identified as a carer? Well, as I was saying at the beginning, it took me a long time. And if you look at this little picture here, you might see some resemblance, because that's my lovely mum. My lovely mum passed away during the lockdown, and that's my little granddaughter who used to help me care for my mum. It was really tough caring for my mum and combining work. I remember being on Teams meetings, sitting next to my mum's hospital bed in the lounge, and thinking, you know, it doesn't get as much tougher than this. So let's talk about now a little bit about what some research about some of the data that we now know about our workforce carers, because it's still quite new. And it does say that 2/3 of us can expect to be a carer in our lifetime. And Terry, I'm going to get you to flip to the next one, because I think this is really important too. This is from our friends at Carers UK. Women take on caring responsibilities a decade earlier than men. So half of women will care by the age of 46 compared to half of men who can expect to care by the age of 57. Now, generally, I would say, talking about carers, that the gap between gender has been narrowed. In fact, looking at the caring population, it is around 48 to 52. And percent, and the divide between male and female. Now, what's interesting is, though, that the gender issue does come to play here, that women are actually caring earlier than men. So it is an issue for our workplace provision to consider. Thank you, Terry. In the NHS, since 2020, we have introduced in our staff survey a question about people's caring responsibility. So that it's split into one between parental caring and the caring that we do for family who wouldn't manage without us if we weren't there. And it's really quite astonishing to find that of the 600,000 responses, that 250,000 said they were caring. Now, I can tell you that we don't know who all those people are. We know a fraction of them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But isn't that extraordinary that a third of the NHS workforce has caring responsibilities, and we're not accommodating that? Thank you, Terry. Every day, 6,000 people take on a caring role. So it's important also to know that the caring population is transient. So people will come in and come out of caring. But what we do know through the Carers UK research is every day 600 carers give up their jobs to take on a caring role. And that is going to have huge implications for them, which we're going to talk about. But our aim is, and certainly the work we're doing here today, is to ensure that no carer should care alone. So what do we know? Why is it that carers are unwilling necessarily to disclose the fact that they're caring? Well, if you cast your mind back into the dim past, into the 70s, you'll remember that there was a revolution at that time around parental rights. Up until the 70s, it was very unusual, for example, to find parents on a children's ward. They weren't allowed to stay, and a lot of these rights were then enshrined into law to allow parents to be with their children while they were in hospital. And it's the same as this now with the Carers campaign. So we want to reduce the stigma of caring. And whereas we're much more willing to talk about our parenting crisis, we still seem quite shy about talking about our caring responsibilities. And as a fact, it is stigmatized. And I think when I'm speaking to carers, what I understand is that for a lot of carers, they're unwilling to disclose that to their managers, and they feel that it might impact on their career chances and their career opportunities. So they're not so inclined to do that. There's a lot of stress. I'm going to be truthful about this. There's a lot of stress in juggling work and care, and there's a lot of financial stress too. If you're at the point in your career where you're going to choose between whether you do full-time caring or combine work with care, that's going to impact on your financial future. And a lot of carers I know who in the workplace are often at that point of crisis when they take that decision to resign their posts. It's so important at that point to look at what might help the carer sustain their work life. I know carers who retired, and I think the average is 8 years early. It sounds wonderful, but when it comes to actually then recovering your pension, that's going to have a big impact. And of course, COVID's had a big impact on all of us who are juggling work with care. Since the return to work, a lot of the services that we were able to access pre-COVID days have not returned to the same level. And so finding alternative or replacement care has been quite challenging. Thank you very much, Terry. I'll move on to the next slide. So if we look at the workforce implications just for the NHS, there is a huge issue for us to address here. Workers age between the ages of 50 and 60, which is the peak age of caring, often relating to caring for our elderly relatives. This is the age where they have said that actually they would like to reduce their hours, scale back their hours, have sabbaticals, have time out, but maybe a retire and a return approach. To maybe just help that period in their life where their caring responsibilities are most pressing. And we also know that at all ages from 50 years up to state pension age, are those who are more likely to be economically inactive because of their caring responsibilities. Now, I go back to that gender issue again. So if you take for the fact that in the NHS, 76.7% of us are women in the NHS, you can see now why it is such an important issue for us to address. Thank you very much, Terry. And in considering the fact that the NHS currently has 1 in 10 vacancies, it's huge. We have a shortfall of 50,000 clinical staff and 40,000 nurses. And so if you address that and the peak age of caring, it's absolutely an imperative for us to look at how we retain our work staff, but also how we recruit former carers back into the workplace. Thank you, Terry. And thinking in terms of some of the things that we can and the benefits we can achieve by following that approach, it makes business sense. Centrica, who have been at the forefront of this work, have estimated that the potential cost savings of improving recruitment and retention of staff that care have netted them 2.5 million, and actually they've reduced absenteeism by 4.5 million. So that's really quite compelling business evidence, and we can see this through small and medium enterprises like Listerwood, and also the work of businesses like British Telecom, who have also embraced this. If I can get Terry just to click the next pop-up. The business case is there, but what I would say is the moral case is there too. If you look after your staff, who are, after all, your most important asset, they'll feel more valued. They'll feel better supported and more confident. It will improve your staff health and well-being. And actually, sometimes, particularly caring in end-of-life situations, just keeping that member of staff stable and everything static is a real achievement. So there's lots of things we can share with you that will help to do that. Thank you, Terry. I know, as a manager myself, how hard it can be to manage operational delivery, service delivery, when you have staff absenteeism. So I do get the challenge, but there is a payoff. And a lot of this is a bit like the analogy I would say is like having house insurance. You put it in place and with the hope that you never have to use it. But if you do use it, it's really, really valuable, isn't it? So actually, as managers, if we're approachable, if we know how to have caring conversations, if we understand what our organisation's approaches to flexible working and leave arrangements, that will help us manage our staff. If we promote a place where there is no stigma for carers to come forward and actively support them, we can provide employee benefits, we can provide practical support. There's a whole network of carer support agencies up and down the country. Terry's organisations, Crossroads Care, Surrey being one of them. And so there is a lot we can do. Let's have a quick look at some of those things now, Terry. First of all, we need to know what the workplace legal rights are for carers, and all people, all staff have the right to time off in emergency to care for dependencies. And they have the right now carers have the right now to request for flexible working. Parental leave and shared parental leave has been in place since April 2015. And the right not to be discriminated against or harassed because of association with disability or age was enshrined in the Equality Act. For those who are particularly interested in that, Google Sharon Coleman case. Sharon was a parent carer who worked for a legal company and had to have time off to care for her son who had complex needs. She found that her co-workers were receiving preferential treatment for time off when their children had emergency health appointments, or when they had common colds and flu, like we all have to take time off. And she actually brought together a case that said she was being discriminated against, and hence that's why we can no longer discriminate against carers by association. Sharon Coleman case. Also, the government did announce last year that they intended to bring in employment rights for carers to have 5 days leave from day one of their employment. Now, they consulted on that just before Christmas, and there is currently a private members' bill going through Parliament. The second reading was on the 9th of September. I can't update you on that because, of course, the death of Her Majesty the Queen on the 8th has put that process on pause. So a lot there to consider in terms of ensuring that you are meeting the legal rights. Let's move on now to what might help. First of all, today you've come along to join us, so you're beginning to understand the needs of carers. There's a lot of research out there. I'll very much pinpoint you to our partners, Carers UK. They've done a really good job of analysing the data around carers and work. Being flexible, it works both ways. What I find, or what I've always find, is if you're flexible with your staff, they'll give it back 10 times. So that really does work. Be clear about your goals and targets. This is about having those conversations before a crisis happens, and agree as a team how to manage expectations. I know in one hospital setting where a member of staff had a lot of caring responsibility. She was a theatre nurse, and the team wrapped around their support around her. And basically they set up a contingency plan that should she have to exit left, one of them guaranteed that they would stand in for her. I thought that was a lovely approach to team support for the carer. Good communication is essential. Creativity about problem solving, and consider trial periods. I think that's really important because I'm going to talk about contingency planning in a minute. Thank you, Terry. And we know what works: preparation, preparation, preparation. But Terry's going to talk about policy. There are lots of other things that you can do. There are carers networks, staff networks, carers passports you can look at, peer support, and looking at the National Carer Days to promote carer-friendly practice within your organisation. Thank you, Terry. Contingency planning. It's really important as managers that if we know if our staff have caring responsibility and they may well have an emergency, that we actually set down a contingency plan should they have to exit left. And that might be that they catch up work in the evening, so they work flexibly, or they may have someone who comes in to cover them during any period that they're not able to do their work. So a lot can be done, and I really recommend that you hold a conversation with your members of staff who are caring to put together a contingency plan template that will give reassurance to you as a manager, but also be reassuring for the member of staff. Thank you, Terry. Carer passports, I've spoken about those. These are a way of recording in your HR record management systems that the person is a carer, and they are portable. They can be moved from one organisation to another. And the Charity for Civil Servants have really demonstrated that by introducing a carer passport system, that it has reaped huge benefits for both the organisation, but also to the staff who are juggling work with care. And there's some numbers on there to just evidence that. Thank you, Terry. I just wanted to share some quick thoughts about how you might want to go about it. These are my top 10 tips. I won't go through each one of them individually because you'll get a slide deck, but I think everything must start with research. Research in your organisation, who are your carers and what do they want? Have a conversation with your carers. They will know what will work for them. And do you have a work plan for your carers? Once you know what they need to support them to stay in work, do you have a work plan for that? And are carers part of your recruitment process? Are you tapping into those wonderful skills that carers have to bring them back into work? What resources do you have for your carers? Are you accessing the local carer support service? Do you provide staff with carers training? There's a huge amount that can be done. And of course, not least, the wonderful work that Crossroads Care Surrey have done to provide you with those resources. Thank you, Terry. I'm going to hand over to Terry now to talk about some of those. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. Yes, I mean, Debbie's already made a clear note that legally, according to the Equalities Act 2010, employers cannot treat carers differently. Carers have the right to take unpaid leave in an emergency just the same as everybody else. Also, the Human Rights Act in 1998 has been used to stand up for the rights of unpaid carers as well. But morally, surely employers should want to provide the best support for all employees, especially if they're experiencing challenges outside of work that impact their well-being in the workplace. This should be reflected wherever possible in the values and culture, in my opinion, of the organisation. As a starting point for us as carers leads, as for organisations like NHS, but also for Crossroads Care, we try to work hard to ensure that organisations have a clear definition of what it means to be a carer, and Debbie's already mentioned that. It's important because many people do not identify themselves as carers and may not think to raise the issue. At Crossroads Care, we've just built, and on our website, you will have access to a tool, a questionnaire, which is effectively, am I a carer? And this tool will give you a number of very simple questions that will then, if you answer them correctly, if you answer them accurately, I'll guess, or honestly, will give you an indication as to whether you are already an unpaid carer, or whether you're on your way to being an unpaid carer, or whether you're not an unpaid carer. And I think that's a critical starting point for us, and that identification to give people the confidence to know that they actually do and are caring for people, their loved ones, but also in a lot of cases are trying to juggle work and the care responsibility. Others who do self-identify as carers may not be comfortable sharing their information with their employer if they feel they're unlikely to be supported. It's important to emphasise that caring experiences vary. A working carer may be providing constant support, as Debbie said, a few hours a week. The care may be at home, or they may have to travel to support somebody. All of these things can influence how caring affects people. And as Debbie said earlier, caring can be a sudden experience or a gradual process. So in terms of identifying carers in the workplace, Debbie's mentioned a number of issues, but I'll just go through a couple of obvious ones for me. A carer register, carer's passport scheme, something that can be brought into your staff induction, regular appraisals, employee surveys. Having carer role models who are willing to talk about their experiences at work may also encourage others to identify themselves as carers and ask for support. Carer champions could be another way of giving carers a way of talking to somebody who is not part of the management, but can advise of support and other cases that autonomously may give confidence to discuss these issues. As I said earlier, not all carers want to be known, and that decision should be respected, understanding not everybody is comfortable in sharing or disclosing their personal situation. One of the biggest problems that you all, I'm sure, as employers face when supporting employees who have needs that do not fit within the normal organisational HR guidelines is consistency. A fear of discrimination, a legal challenge, can be enough to encourage some employers to avoid offering support to working carers. So how can you actually stop this? Well, first and foremostly, develop a carers policy, a framework, or some guidelines. Formally recognising working carers is an important step to developing formal measures and in creating a culture that is supportive of working carers. But a formal recognition of working carers and the challenges they face is important in supporting self-respect, clearly an important contributor to subjective well-being. It's therefore very important that carers are recognised within the organisation's policies and procedures. It's important to have a carers policy, a framework or guidance so that everybody in the organisation is clear about where they can access the support that is available and that there isn't within the company's general HR guidelines. This not only provides a clear understanding for the working carers, but also gives all people managers the confidence and support that all employees will be treated equally, which I think is a big issue for employers in terms of delivering that consistent approach. From a business's point of view and the people manager within the business, the fear of discrimination is often the biggest barrier to supporting disabilities and uncommon HR policies such as working carers. The policy could include a number of different support packages, such as carers leave, special leave arrangements, flexible working options, as Debbie's talked about, information on carers breaks, access to wellbeing arrangement, care support networks. They could even include access to occupational health services, employee assistance programs, or signposting to support organisations such as Crossroads Care, Action for Carers, Silk, etc. As we said earlier, building support around good practice is key to doing all of those things. In terms of supporting a policy and supporting the emotional well-being of working carers by offering counselling or well-being support, this can often have a very positive effect on both work and care. It's helpful within any policy or guidelines created to support workers to outline different people's roles and responsibilities within the policy so that everybody is clear as to where they fit into the execution of the framework and the authority they have to support working carers. Employees should be encouraged to speak to their line manager and HR support contact if they're caring for someone and feel they need support. But we know this is not something that's easy for some people. That is why within our line manager training, it's important to instill good listening techniques, an understanding of the signs of stress and anxiety as a result of tiredness due to mixing the caring and working responsibilities, and compassionate questioning techniques to help them to give the carer the confidence to share their difficulties. Line managers very often need to understand what they need to record in terms of any leave, time off given to working carers, and when they need to seek support from the HR team. Line managers also need to have the confidence to be able to talk to HR, to explore and agree what is possible and suitable. People managers need to be familiar and up to date with organisations' policies, framework for supporting carers in the workplace. They need to be trained and they need to be comfortable in having sensitive conversation with working carers to find out what support they need. They also need to ensure with HR that all employees are aware and understand their own and the company's responsibilities in relation to any policy that the organisation has. As already highlighted in larger organisations, carers networks, carers champions, open discussion sessions for carers can help give carers the confidence to share experiences and help with solutions. As we all know, and I've seen this in many organisations who've set out to improve their support of employees, changing a policy can be easy. It's also very easy to do this, and very often this is done at a senior level and does not involve those who it actually affects. Communicating this change and maintaining both clear understanding of the policy, who is responsible, the roles of the line manager and the employees is something very different. Changing a culture can be a very different proposition and requires everybody in the organisation to understand their role. It also requires support procedures so that everybody has the confidence to play their part, along with regular reviews to ensure that policies are up to date and that everyone knows the changes that may affect them. After all, with 2 out of 3 of us likely to be placed in a situation where we are caring for somebody, and with the difficulties we have in the world at the moment in recruiting suitable and experienced staff, along with the cost of losing a skilled or trained worker, which Debbie and I have some conflicting thoughts about the cost to an organisation. I read somewhere that the average cost is somewhere in the region of £30,000, and that's based on middle of the road employee within a company. But as Debbie's quite rightly said, the majority of people who are carers tend to fall into that 45 to 65-year age bracket, in which case a lot of them are in more senior positions. And some of the statistics and research that's been done recently has said that the cost to replace those people can be as much as 150%. And therefore, if somebody's actually earning £50,000, the cost of the organisation in terms of lost capacity and recruitment costs could be as much as 150 grand. So surely it makes sense for every reason to do all we can, apart from our moral obligations, to ensure we keep as many working carers in the workplace as we possibly can. Thank you. I think we're open to questions now, I believe. Paul.
Hello there, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Terry and Debbie, for a fantastic event, and my apologies to everyone for the various technical glitches. I hold my hands up for that. I apologise. We've had some brilliant questions coming into the chat. It seems to be the predominant place rather than the actual Q&A section, so that's fine. If I may, I know, Debbie, you've been quite active on the chat, and you know, you've pretty much done all the hard work for me, so I might read out a selection of the ones that I think are more interesting. Someone says, excuse me, someone says, my caring responsibility started 5 years ago. My employer is a small company of 4 people, of which I am one of them. They have allowed me to keep working from home following COVID. I am also working a 4-day week, but they are unable to offer any more assistance due to the company size. I pitched that to both of you, I suppose, for feedback and any sort of way you can elaborate on that.
I think this is it's a real difficult one, isn't it, Karen? And thank you so much for your questions. We absolutely accept that for organisations like the NHS, big organisations, it's clearly they've got the infrastructure behind them, they've got big HR departments, but this is why we wanted to link the smaller organisations into the support offer that Crossroads Care Surrey provide, because we do recognise that small and medium enterprises don't necessarily have those resources to draw down on. So I think, Karen, the answer would be is to consider what more would help you to balance your work and caring responsibilities, but also to signpost your employer to the resources that Crossroads Care Surrey are providing so that they can make use of that. Is that, would you agree with that, Terry?
I would. I think that's exactly what I was going to say. The only thing I would probably add to that is that we also have just launched an information services directory on our website at Crossroads, and that information services directory is there to provide and signpost to all of the services and support mechanisms that are around across Surrey, and also nationally, that can help and support. So I think it's a combination of what your employer can possibly do, and as Debbie said, to look at what we can do if they want to reach out to find out how we can help them to do it. but also what you can do to make your caring responsibilities easier, if that is possible.
And I think on that point, it's worth just reminding everyone in terms of carers' legal rights that since the Care Act 2014, the eligibility threshold for carers assessment is such that really on the appearance of need, and Karen, certainly you would qualify this, that you have the right for a carers assessment. And part of that carers assessment, which is conducted by social care, will be to look at your needs to have a life outside of caring and how you sustain your employment. And it might be, the might being the proverbial might, that a package of care could support the person that you care for to allow you a little bit more time away to earn a living. And I know the cost of living is a really big issue for our carers at the moment. And there was another question, Paul, wasn't there, in the chat around you know, how can I manage my caring role, you know, when it's escalating and I need to work full time. This is something we come across a lot. And I'd just like to respond a little bit to that. I've been in that, I think it's Siobhan, I've been in that situation myself, Siobhan. And I'm not going to pretend that caring for my mother, certainly in the last month, was easy. It really was 24/7 at her bedside for that month. It happened during COVID, so I was working from home. But of course, an awful lot of people now are being asked to return to the office. So I'm not sure whether that would be universally available. Although a lot of employers now are saying, you know, that they will take hybrid working, which certainly for some carers helps them manage their caring role. But I would say. I came very close to saying I'm going to need to take a month out of my working life just to see this through. And I think Siobhan and other colleagues who are on this call, you're the best place to judge where you've reached your breaking point. I don't think there is any harm in asking your employer to say, actually, my caring role has escalated to such that I now need to consider taking a sabbatical. And I hope that you know, if that is your experience, that they do give that careful consideration, because as Terry has said, for many of us in that position, they don't want to lose our skills and capabilities. They want to ensure that we return back to our roles, and actually by providing a sabbatical when things get really, really tough, it is another way around interpreting a carer-friendly employment policy. Terry, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sums it up really. I mean, for employers, as I've said, it's about a culture. It's about having the right policies in place. It's about ensuring that your line managers, your managers understand how to adopt that policy and use that policy fairly. As you said at the very outset, you know, parenting and so on has been given a lot of advantages that carers don't get. So it's just the norm for people to take 3, 6 months up to a year off. You know, should they give birth to somebody, or you know, whether that's from the mother's perspective or from the father's perspective. So I think, you know, in terms of asking for a sabbatical in an emergency, as we're talking about here, for care and responsibilities, is something that I think employers should look very favourably on. That's my view.
And also, Terry, it's going to affect us all, isn't it? There's very few of us who get to that peak age of caring, 45 to 65, who have not experienced you know, caring for a loved one in end of life circumstances. As I say, usually it's a parent. I can't tell you how many times I've turned up at an office pre-pandemic days when I've looked at colleagues who have spent their entire weekend travelling up the M1 to visit relatives up north and loved ones up north, and they've already started the week exhausted on Monday morning because they've been trying to combine that work with care. And I do think that actually seeking help and support as a carer is so important. We do have wonderful services. So if colleagues on this call are not aware of our colleagues at Action for Carers Surrey, it's really worth looking at their website and looking at what support they may be able to offer you. But you do have a right to a carer's assessment, regardless of whether you meet social care criteria or not. It's always on the appearance of need. I can see also in the chat box a colleague who is talking about caring in end of life circumstances and caring for elderly relatives. I was on a call yesterday where I was listening to a carer, 87-year-old daughter who was caring for her mother who was 105. Isn't that extraordinary? And of course, the needs for our older carers are such that you're often considering that the carer has health needs as well as the person they're caring for. And so actually the didactic approach, where you look at mutual caring and supporting both carer and caree, is gaining more traction with an aging population and with us all living a little longer. We do need to consider that the carer may be in need of support as well. It's an important point, isn't it? I know not many 87-year-olds are working, but some of them are still out there and doing their bit. But I think caring is something that can affect us at any age. Although of course, working age carers are the predominant demographic for carers. One really good question to ask is and back to your employers, just on the basis of today's discussion, would be to ask how many of the staff are known to be caring. That's how we started our journey, and we did a staff survey to ascertain how many of our staff were carers. And if you'll recall from the beginning of my presentation, a third in the NHS. So it would be interesting for you and your employers to find that out. Are there any more questions? Burning questions.
Debbie, can I just quickly just jump in? Going back to the comment you made earlier about the Care Act and the provision for providing carers assessments. Obviously, the frustration faced by carers, especially working carers, around having sufficient resources available to them to perhaps continuing their caring role, but also with their working life as well without any complications. What we're finding, and I think this is really important to reiterate this, the carer's assessment doesn't always deliver everything that we want for the carer. You know, in other words, you can have some extra support so that someone else can look after your cared for while you're off at work, or you can take a respite, so that you can go away and have a little bit of a break. Most of this actually ends up requiring additional resources for the cared for person. So, assuming that the cared for person has a package of care already, or even if they don't, they need to be assessed accordingly. But I think it's about the expectations, or setting the right expectations for the carer in terms of where that support's going to come from. It may not necessarily be directly as a result of their own carer's assessment, but it may trigger a further consideration or a reassessment for the person that they're caring for in order to get that support. I just thought it was important
Very
to reiterate
important.
that point.
I couldn't agree more. And in Surrey, certainly, we would be looking at 80% of the community would be funding their own care. And so I think this is more about families thinking strategically about their needs, and for people with care and support needs, understanding that their carer may well need a break, that their carer needs to continue to be able to work. And so I couldn't agree more. Those conversations need to happen within families, and everyone's needs to be considered. Does that respond to that?
Yeah, very much so. It is about having the conversations, but also, as I say, just making sure that for an organisation like ours, where we're supporting carers day in, day out, that the message we're giving, the information we're providing, is such that, you know, we don't want to promise the world. I wish we could, but
No.
they just need to realise how the system works and where we could potentially tap into in order to get them the support that they need. I think if we're clear and transparent with that from the very beginning, then there is no potential issues later in that, you know, carers are disappointed because, well, why did you do my carers assessment if you're not going to be able to give me what I really genuinely need here, you know? So yeah, just being clear in terms of what is available, what is possible, and what can be delivered.
And I think that's a really important point, which is a beautiful segue to the fact that Crossroads Care do provide a range of support services, not least respite care. Some of it is funded through local contracts, and some of it will need to be funded by the family. But actually, the needs, the carer's needs to have a break are absolutely pivotal for the caring circumstance to be retained, really, and maintained. So thinking about it holistically within the family, so important. Did I see a hand up from Ishmael? Ishmael's one of my colleagues in Islington. I'm sure I saw his hand up earlier. I don't know.
That was me.
That
Debbie.
was you.
That was me
Ishmael.
that yeah, raised the question.
Yeah.
So I put my hand down now. Yeah.
Thank you, Ishmael. Lovely to have you join us today.
Thank you for this.
Yeah. Are there any more questions that we can help you with today, or can we pop the link into the chat, Terry, for the Crossroads suite?
Yes, indeed.
That
Yes,
I think
indeed.
that would be very helpful. And I think, Paul, we've
Paul,
also
appreciate that.
Paul, we've also agreed to share the slides after the event, and you've got my details on there for what they're worth. I'm always happy to try and help, if nothing else, but as Ishmael said, to help navigate people around the health and care system. And also, on a personal note, always happy to try and support a fellow carer who's struggling work with care. I know it is tough. But with companies and organisations like Crossroads, we'll make it that little bit easier for us all. So thank you to Crossroads Care Surrey.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Thank you to all those who've attended today. I hope there have been some interesting points for you all. I hope there's been some learning points, and certainly for employers, I do hope that there's some opportunities within the discussions that we've had to help you to see how you can improve your relationship, but also how you support working carers going forward. So I thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.